I hope you've got some time and a snack because this tale stretches from late 2019 right up until last week. Here's a bit of backstory. My soon-to-be ex-wife was my high school sweetheart. We started dating back in 1992 when we were both 17, we're both 45 now, and have been together ever since. She's the only woman I've ever been with. We tied the knot at 22, just out of college. A year later, we welcomed our first son, and then another, a few years down the road. Our boys are now 22 and 17. I devoted 23 years to her, built her a home, worked tirelessly to provide the life she desired. We had our rough patches, but who doesn't? Even in the toughest times, we managed to pull through and come out stronger. So discovering her affair was a devastating blow. Let's go back to March 2020 when I first sensed something was amiss. For a couple of months before that, things felt off. I was recovering from reconstructive knee surgery after tearing my ACL in the fall of 2019. My mobility was still pretty limited. I had only regained about 55 of my knee's range of motion. This put a strain on many aspects of our home life. I was on workers' comp due to my injury and couldn't keep up with my usual chores, so things started piling up. My sons helped as much as they could, but some tasks were solely my responsibility and had to wait or fall to my wife, who wasn't happy about it. Our intimate life also came to a screeching halt. It had been dwindling even before my injury, but during my recovery it completely stopped. During these months, we'll call her Rachel, began spending increasing amounts of time hanging out with coworkers after work. From November 2019 to March 2020, this became a regular routine for her. Naturally, I didn't think much of it. In the 23 years we'd been together, I had no reason to doubt her or feel mistrustful. She had her friends, I had mine, and we had mutual friends as well. I'd go out with my friends frequently, and there was never an issue. It was all above board. But around January of this year, I started noticing something strange. Rachel began to act noticeably distant. Sure, we were in a bit of a funk, but she'd never been so withholding of affection before. The usual hugs and kisses that were once common disappeared. Her phone, which had always been an open book, was now a source of secrecy. She'd previously shared things with me, DIY ideas, recipes from Pinterest memes, and all sorts of things. But suddenly she became very guarded about her phone. Her interactions with me became curt and irritated, as if she was constantly preoccupied. By March, the pandemic hit, and New York City was under lockdown. Our jobs were deemed essential, so neither of us had to work from home. I had just been cleared to return to work after 5 months of sitting around recovering from knee surgery. The inactivity was driving me crazy. I'm someone who thrives on physical activity. I'm an avid martial artist and usually hit the gym 4 times a week, plus I was always busy with home projects. Within a week or two of the lockdown, Rachel told me she'd need to start working extra hours. I didn't think much of it at first, given her job. I assumed it would be occasional. But it turned out to be a daily affair, and not just an extra hour or two. She'd come home 3 or more hours later than usual, head straight to the shower, spend a bit of time with me, see our 17-year-old, our 22-year-old was living with his girlfriend across town, and then go to bed. As I regained strength in my knee and we started being intimate again, it quickly became clear that Rachel wasn't mentally or emotionally engaged, which I picked up on almost immediately. By early April, things were starting to make sense. All the signs were pointing towards her having an affair, and I realized I needed to get to the bottom of it. I dove into researching what to look for in signs of infidelity, and unsurprisingly, Rachel seemed to fit every single indicator of suspicious behavior. Next, I focused on finding concrete proof. I began with her social media. I checked out her Facebook posts from the past few months, which included the usual photos of us and our sons, her hanging out with friends, and several pictures from nights out with her coworkers. In these photos, there were familiar faces from her work, and some I didn't recognize. But one guy kept showing up. In every picture he appeared in, he was uncomfortably close to her, his arm around her shoulder, or his hand resting on her lower back. Far too close for comfort, especially for someone I'd never met. That left a bad taste in my mouth. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was discovering that this guy was not only friends with Rachel on Facebook, but also followed her on Instagram. So I decided to check out his Facebook profile, only to find that I was blocked. Why on earth was I blocked from seeing his profile while he was connected with Rachel? That was the last straw. At this point, I was fully immersed in my detective role. I wasn't even trying to deny it anymore. I knew she was cheating on me with this guy, My goal now was to figure out just how long this had been going on. Over the course of April and May, that's exactly what I did. I had no idea just how much information could be gleaned from phone records, text messages, and emails until then. Thanks to our family cell plan, I was able to access a wealth of data. Here's a revised version of Part 4. The data history from Rachel's phone was revealing the two numbers she'd been in contact with the most from October 2019 to April 2020 were mine and one I didn't recognize. A quick search online confirmed it belonged to the guy from the photo, the one who had blocked me on Facebook. We'll call him Lover, because that's exactly what he is. At this point, the picture was becoming even clearer. However, many of their messages and texts seemed to be missing, suggesting she was deleting a lot of them. I knew she was cheating with this guy, but I didn't have the smoking gun I needed. I needed more concrete evidence. That's when I decided to confide in my best friend Matt. I told him everything I'd discovered. He asked if I'd confronted Rachel with what I had, and I explained that I didn't think it was enough yet. That's when he mentioned an app that could allegedly monitor her communications in real time. I won't name it here, but I downloaded it, synced it with my data plan, and waited. Within a few days, I got what I needed, a text exchange between Rachel and Lover, talking about how much fun they'd had the night before and making plans to do it again that weekend. It was like a punch to the gut. To say I was devastated doesn't even begin to cover it. That moment felt like my personal D-Day, and for the next 2 days I was a wreck. I actively avoided her during those 2 days, and she seemed visibly shaken by my coldness. She tried to comfort me and asked what was wrong, but I just brushed her off and walked away. I couldn't bear to look at her. This was the woman I had devoted 23 years of my life to, given everything I could as a husband, and now she was cheating on me with a guy only 5 years older than our eldest son. By the 3rd day, my sadness had turned into pure rage. I reached out to Matt to let him know my suspicions had been confirmed, and he asked if I'd confronted Rachel, yet I told him I hadn't and that I wanted revenge. I didn't just want a divorce. I wanted to dismantle her life and utterly ruin her. It was going to take time, so I set about devising a plan. From my research on infidelity, I remembered a quote that resonated with me. The enemy of infidelity is unpredictability. That would be the cornerstone of my strategy. I planned to make her life a living nightmare, while secretly plotting my exit. By early June, with the app still running, I was collecting a mountain of data. Every night I watched their messages unfold. They were treating their affair like a full-blown relationship, sexting, exchanging romantic notes, sharing nudes, the whole works. I stopped bothering to read it all in detail. I was just gathering and storing information on my private server. At the same time, I started acting in ways that would throw her off. I began going out at odd hours and coming home even later than she did. When she was around, I was always on my phone, and when she asked what I was up to, I'd just say stuff and put my phone away. I also changed all my login information so she couldn't access any of my accounts. For our entire marriage, we had always been open with each other. But around the time I suspect her affair started, she had changed her Facebook password and her phone password, claiming it was due to security issues. Nice cover for hiding an affair from your husband. I filled Matt in on my plan and also told my older sister and 2 of my closest friends, Chris and Laura, about what was going on. These were people I trusted deeply, and I made them promise to keep everything confidential. For context, Matt and I have been friends since childhood, and Chris and Laura have been close friends since high school. Pay attention to Laura, she'll play a role later on. July rolls around and my soon-to-be ex-wife is in full-blown paranoia mode. She's texting and calling me, constantly asking if I'll be home when she gets in, wanting to know where I am when I'm not home, and grilling me about what I'm up to. It's clear the seeds of doubt I planted last month are starting to sprout, especially in her conversations with Lover. She's opening up to him about her confusion and frustration, complaining that I'm becoming cold and distant. The nerve of this woman. Amid these exchanges with Lover, she even suggests they might need to stop meeting at our place because she's worried I might show up unexpectedly. So it's confirmed she's had this jerk in our home. Thanks a lot. Rachel. In one particular conversation, Lover asks her if she's concerned about me potentially cheating on her, which really riles her up. I can't even begin to describe how much joy I got from reading that my cheating wife is actually arguing with her lover about whether she should be worried that her husband might be unfaithful. The irony was almost too much to handle. Now let me be clear, I'm not seeing anyone. When I leave, I'm usually at Matt's or Chris' place, throwing back drinks, watching fights, and hanging out with my friends. Sometimes I'm at my big sister's house, spending time with her and my brother-in-law, who's like an older brother to me. My sister, who's 52, and her husband, who's 58, know about Rachel's infidelity, but not about my plans. I couldn't risk telling him he's a bit of a blabbermouth. Let's fast forward to October when things really start to heat up. By this time, I've been deep into my fake affair for 3 months, and Rachel is acutely aware that I'm actively distancing myself from her. It had been since the day I set my plan in motion until October 20th, 2020, when she finally confronted me since I had any physical contact with her. No hugs, no kisses, no intimacy of any kind. Not that she needed it. She was still seeing Lover, either at his place or at motels. That afternoon, Rachel calls me at work. It wasn't unusual for her to call me before all this mess started, but it had been a while. She tells me she needs me to come straight home after work because she has something important to tell me. I'll admit I half expected her to confess her affair, but of course she didn't. Instead, when I get home, she asks if I'm unhappy with her. The nerve of this woman. She brings up how I've been spending too much time away from home, that I don't show her affection anymore, and that our sex life has completely fizzled out. She says she's worried that I'm pushing her away because I'm still holding a grudge over how she treated me while I was recovering from my knee surgery. Then came the punchline. She actually asked if I was cheating on her. I lost it. I fell to the floor laughing uncontrollably. And when I say uncontrollably, I mean like I was on laughing gas. To her, it probably seemed like I was laughing off the accusation of infidelity. But in reality, I was laughing at the sheer absurdity of the situation. I was crying, pounding the floor with laughter for a good 2 minutes before I managed to pull myself together. I looked her in the eyes for the first time in months, shook my head, but didn't give her an answer. I stood up, dusted myself off, kissed the top of her head, and then settled in for the night. Later that night, while I'm in my office, I decide to check what Rachel was saying to Lover. I fire up the app and see they're actually texting in real time. She tells Lover, "I know he's cheating on me. I'd asked him tonight and he just laughed in my face. He fell on the floor and laughed for what felt like 5 minutes. He doesn't even care about how I feel anymore. I don't know how or why, but he's gone. I know I've lost him. This is karma. I can feel it." The grin on my face while reading that must have looked like the Cheshire Cat's. She was unraveling. Lover tried to comfort her, pointing out that if I had cared about her, she wouldn't have had to come to him for the affection and support I wasn't providing. But from the tone of her replies, it was clear she was starting to doubt herself. She had the audacity to step out on our marriage because I couldn't fulfill my role due to a legitimate injury and kept the affair going for nearly a year. Yet the mere thought of losing me to someone else was making her second-guess things. What a pathetic display of weakness. Meanwhile, I was working on the second phase of my revenge plan, which involved getting my finances in order. In September, I met with a family attorney to start the divorce proceedings. Armed with the extensive evidence I had collected, New York is an at-fault state for divorce, and the solid proof of Rachel's infidelity meant I could hit her hard in court. My lawyer advised me to get all my financial documents ready for asset division, so I took it a step further. I secretly withdrew all the money from our joint account and transferred it to my personal account. I also began searching for an apartment as part of Phase 2 of my plan. By November, I hadn't altered my behavior. In fact, I had ramped it up even more. This is where my friend Laura comes into play for some background. Laura and Rachel were never exactly best buds. I met Laura in my freshman year of high school, which was 2 years before I met Rachel. Even back then, Rachel saw Laura as a threat because she was my closest female friend. Rachel's distrust of Laura was always implied, though she never said it outright. Anyone who paid attention could see it. On the flip side, Laura was never fond of Rachel either. Early on in my relationship with Rachel, Laura pointed out how Rachel seemed to be pushing herself into our tight-knit group of friends, while I never did the same with Rachel's friends. Laura was annoyed because she saw through Rachel's intentions. Rachel's circle even now had no male friends aside from Lover. Meanwhile, Laura was the only woman in my group. Laura had been stuck overseas due to the pandemic, but finally returned to NYC on November 3rd to celebrate her return. Matt, Chris, and I decided to throw a small dinner party at Chris's place, with just the 5 of us, Matt, Chris, Chris's wife, who's also Laura's sister, Laura, and me. We followed CDC guidelines and took the virus seriously. Laura, being the mastermind she is, came up with a devious plan to unsettle Rachel. She suggested we recreate some of the photos I had seen of Rachel and Lover from months ago and post them on my Facebook, and that's exactly what we did. It wasn't until November 5th that Rachel caught wind of it. I'm guessing a few friends noticed the updates and saw how uncomfortably close I was with Laura. This threw her for a loop because she still believed I was cheating. I can almost guarantee she wanted to accuse Laura of being the other woman, but she knew Laura had been in Europe for most of the year. Despite this, Rachel didn't hesitate to confront me that night, criticizing me for being handsy in the pictures. I saw it as the perfect moment to land a solid blow. I replied, "So what about those pictures of you and Lover from last year? He was pretty handsy in those too. Did you see me making a fuss over it?" She was like a deer caught in headlights. It was the first time I had even mentioned Lover's name throughout this whole ordeal. Watching her scramble to explain those photos was like seeing a hamster wheel spinning out of control. Up until that point, she hadn't realized I had seen those pictures given how infrequently I post on Facebook. When I do post, it's a big deal, which is why the photos with Laura got so much attention in our social circles. And explained she did. Her excuses were pathetic. "He's just like that with everyone. He's a really friendly guy, I can see how it looks, but there's nothing there. I'm sorry if those pictures upset you. I'll delete them." No, Rachel, the photos aren't what hurt me. What hurt was the fact that you've been screwing this guy for nearly a year, all while lying to me about working extra hours and hanging out with friends. But as Lieutenant Com Worf from Star Trek TNG famously said, "Revenge is a dish best served cold." From that night on, Rachel became incredibly clingy and attentive annoyingly. So she tried to initiate affection and intimacy, but I shut her down every time. Meanwhile, I was still collecting every bit of correspondence between her and Lover. By this point, I had become emotionally numb. Any hope I had of salvaging the marriage had evaporated the day I began phase 1 of my plan. Rachel confided in Lover about how I had supposedly become even worse, expressing her confusion and saying she felt like I hated her. Which I did. Then came the bombshell. She announced she couldn't see him anymore. She claimed the guilt was overwhelming and that karma was suffocating her. She couldn't risk losing me. She professed her love for Lover, but insisted she was still in love with me and needed to save her marriage before it was too late. Well, Rachel, you're about 8 months too late for that Lover lost at sending messages like, "He doesn't love you the way I love you, and you're making a mistake. You can't just throw me away like this." That text chain was the last they exchanged until about 3 weeks ago. Throughout November and into December, Rachel was stuck in limbo trying to figure out where I stood and still unsure if I was unfaithful. Meanwhile, Lover was bombarding her with messages daily, but she wasn't responding. I'd see her check her phone often only to quickly put it away. In the meantime, phase 2 of my plan was complete. The divorce papers were ready, and I had secured a studio apartment in Co-op City. New Yorkers will recognize the area signing a 2-year lease. All my money was safely in my personal account. I was poised to deliver the knockout punch. By Thanksgiving, things were reaching their climax. My eldest son and his girlfriend were hosting a small gathering with our immediate families. So it was me, Rachel, our youngest, my eldest, and his girlfriend and her parents. She's an only child. We had a great evening. My eldest girlfriend, who is studying to become a chef, did all the cooking herself. Let me tell you, she can cook like a dream. In order to maintain appearances and avoid raising any suspicions, I made a point to show affection toward Rachel throughout the evening. I gave her kisses on the cheek, little hugs, and wrapped my arms around her shoulders from behind. She ate it up, clearly enjoying the attention. This was the first time I had touched her since that night in October, when she confronted me so, nearly 2 months, I won't lie. I felt a strong sense of repulsion while doing it, but it was necessary. I couldn't afford to blow my cover, especially in front of my sons, my eldest girlfriend, and her parents. Any signs of distance between Rachel and me would certainly raise red flags. After the gathering, my youngest decided to stay over at his big brother's place for the night, so Rachel and I headed home. During the drive, she thanked me for being so kind to her and said, "I don't know what you're going through, baby, but I'm here for you." I had to stifle a fit of maniacal laughter. Instead, I calmly replied, "I know, I just need time." That night marked the first time since spring that Rachel and I had sex. Given what I was about to do, I figured I might as well get some action before I removed her from my life entirely. I won't go into detail, but let's just say it wasn't exactly lovemaking. When I was done, she lay there like a discarded rag doll, utterly spent and confused. There was no cuddling or any of the usual post-intimacy rituals. I simply got up, took a shower, and went to sleep in my office. One thing that did throw her off was that I used a condom, something I hadn't done in 2 decades. She seemed perplexed but didn't ask any questions. I certainly wasn't about to go raw knowing she'd been doing that with Lover for months. The next morning, I checked my trusty spy app, and for the first time in weeks, Rachel had responded to Lover. The guy went all out with his declarations. He professed his love for her, telling her that she was wasting her time trying to rekindle a flame that had long since extinguished. He said she'd been in a prison with me for 23 years and deserved to experience the love and affection of someone who would truly cherish her. And this guy, he's 27 years old, just 5 years older than our eldest son. He's that infatuated with a 45-year-old married mother of 2. What a high-quality simp. She chose to blow up our marriage and destroy our home for this guy. A pretty boy with a soft side. Ha! Rachel's response was a repetition of what she'd said before. She expressed her love for Lover and how much she enjoyed their time together, but insisted that she couldn't lose me. I was still the love of her life, though she'd always have a special place for him in her heart. She suggested they could remain friends, but the physical aspect of their relationship was over. Predictably, Lover begged her to meet one last time that week, and of course she agreed. One last hurrah, right? I wasn't in a position to criticize after all I had done the same to her the previous night. Naturally, I added all of this to the archive I was meticulously compiling. December 4th marked the beginning of Phase 3, the final stage of Operation Shinobi Ghost. With the divorce papers in hand and my new place ready, it was time to start moving my stuff out of the house. But first I needed to break the news to my boys. I called my oldest to the house that Friday night and asked him to join me in my office. There I laid everything out for him, not the specific details, but the fact that their mother had been cheating on me for over a year and that I would be filing for divorce soon. My 17-year-old was particularly shaken. He had recently gone through his own experience with infidelity. His first girlfriend had cheated on him just 4 months earlier. The idea that his own mother was capable of such betrayal hit him hard. My oldest son took it better and suggested that his brother stay with him until things settled down, which I agreed to. We packed up some of his things and he asked me if I was going to be okay. I reassured him, saying, "Yes, son, I'm going to be all right. And so are you. We're going to be okay. I promise." With that, they left. The hardest part was over, and now it was time to execute the final phase of my plan. Over the next few weeks, Matt helped me remove my most sensitive belongings from the house bit by bit. I provided him with a list of items to retrieve while Rachel and I were at work and left him the spare key. These were items Rachel wouldn't notice missing unless specifically told. I also got a new phone and number informing only the essential people. Matt, Chris, Laura, my boys, my sister, and my mother of my new contact details. Meanwhile, I maintained the charade with Rachel. I continued to give her just enough affection to keep her off the scent while she remained in touch with Lover. Although their communication wasn't as frequent as before, there was still an emotional connection. The fog of uncertainty was thinning, but it lingered. As I meticulously prepared for the final step, I gathered and printed every piece of data I had collected since the beginning of my plan. Call logs, texts, photos, emails, everything. I must have spent over $1,500 on office supplies. Printer, ink, paper, binders, you name it. I organized everything into 14 binders, cataloging the affair from its inception to the last detail recorded on December 16th. I then packed each binder into a box, wrapped them as gifts, and addressed them to various recipients. My mother, since my father passed away 7 years ago. Rachel's parents, her 2 sisters, her brother, her HR department did. I mentioned Lover works for the same company, and there's a strict rule against intercompany relationships. Several of her friends, Lover and Lover's parents. On December 16th, I hauled all those packages to the post office and sent them out. Delivery was set for December 22, 24. Perfect timing. So it's Christmas Eve. Rachel comes home around her usual time. I'm unsure if she'd seen Lover. I stopped tracking her on the app on the 18th, figuring I'd squeezed all the value out of it. As usual, she showers, hangs out with me a bit, and I have one last intimate encounter with her on the living room couch. Yeah, I know I'm a real piece of work. Afterward, she turns in for the night. The final phase was finally upon me. The nuke I'd been arming since June was about to be launched. In the dead of night, I woke up and wrapped one of the remaining binders, placing the divorce papers inside the cover with a note that read, "Merry Christmas." Next to it, I left my old phone and my lawyer's business card. I packed up the rest of my essential belongings into 2 backpacks and left the home I'd spent 23 years in for the very last time. That, my friends, was 1 week ago. To Rachel, I am completely off the grid. Gone shadow ghosted. I've blocked her on Facebook, but she still hasn't blocked me for some reason. So I'm keeping an eye on the fallout. It's absolutely glorious. My packages have reached everyone I sent them to, and Rachel is getting crucified. Her youngest sister tore her to shreds. Both of her parents have condemned her. My mom absolutely annihilated her. I know my mom has a mean streak, but the things she said about Rachel were downright savage. Rachel's been frantically trying to find out if anyone knows where I am, but those who do aren't saying a word. She's desperately posting on her Facebook feed, probably hoping I'm watching, but I'm not saying a damn thing without my lawyer present. That'll be the next time I share oxygen with her. She can't spin the narrative to paint me as the bad guy, because I've exposed her to everyone who matters to her. From what I've heard from a mutual friend who works at the same company, she and lover are being put on administrative leave as of tomorrow. So chances are, she'll be heading into 2021 unemployed. As for the final 2 binders, one has been handed over to my lawyer as the last piece of evidence for the impending divorce, and the last one I've put in my storage unit to be burned in Chrisfire pit once the divorce is finalized. Do I feel guilty about this? Not in the slightest. For 23 years I did right by this woman. I gave her the home she wanted, the family she wanted, and the life I thought we both deserved. I loved her unconditionally. I never faltered, never strayed, and never even considered breaking my vows. When issues arose that affected our marriage, I came to her, and we worked through them as best we could. She chose to find comfort in another man's bed. Instead of coming to me about her unhappiness, she stepped out with a young punk who gave her the thrills she craved. So no, I have no sympathy for what I did or for her. She can burn in hell for all I care. The most I stand to lose is my house, a car, and maybe a couple $100 a month in alimony. But with the divorce filed under the statute of adultery and the overwhelming evidence I've provided, that might even get waived. As far as I'm concerned, she's dead to me, and I'm never looking back. The wife of 23 years had a year-long affair with a coworker who was 18 years younger than her. I pretended to be having an affair myself, while gathering evidence of her infidelity. Throughout 2020, I had divorce papers drawn up in early fall and compiled all the evidence by early December. I shipped binders full of this evidence to everyone close to her, timed to arrive around Christmas Eve. On Christmas Eve, I left one binder with the divorce notice attached on my pillow, along with my old phone and the lawyer's business card, while she slept. I then completely went off the grid as her life began to unravel in the days following Christmas. Christmas Day was the first full day I spent in my new apartment. It's still a work in progress, as I have more things I want to get. But overall, I've started to make it my home, since I'll be here for at least the next 2 years. My sons and my eldest girlfriend came over and spent a good part of the day with me. The girlfriend brought over some treats she'd made and prepared a really nice meal. It was wonderful to sit and talk with my sons in a way I hadn't done in a long time. My big sister also visited with more goodies and spent some time with us. It was the first time she'd seen her nephews in nearly a year. Having everyone around was a real boost, and I felt like if I had been alone, I might have just drunk myself into a stupor. Everyone left around 8 p.m., and I decided to go hang out with Chris and his wife, Emily. I spent a few hours with them, had a couple of drinks, and then headed back home. The next major development happened on December 29, 2020. Around midday, I received a text from Laura asking if I was free that night. I wasn't busy, so we decided to meet up after I finished work. She showed up, and we went to a diner not far from my office. Here in NYC, indoor dining is at 25 capacity due to the pandemic, but it's usually easy to get a seat because so many people avoid dining out these days. Once we were seated and had ordered our food, Laura laid all her cards on the table, and honestly, I was expecting this. She confessed that she had feelings for me all the way back when we were teenagers, but never had the chance to tell me because Rachel came along and swept me up before she could. For context, I've known Laura 2 years longer than Rachel. She has been part of my close circle of friends myself. Matt and Chris since high school. We were the social outcasts, the raver kids who didn't fit into the usual cliques. Back then, Laura struggled with her weight and had diabetes. She was the heavy-set goth girl who was super cool but didn't get much attention from guys. Despite this, there was always chemistry between us. Today, Laura is a personal trainer and yoga instructor. She's the transformation of the ugly duckling into a beautiful swan, if I may say so myself. To cut a long story short, we decided that once my divorce is finalized, we would start seeing each other. And yes, I slept with her that night. I took her back to my new place, and we had an amazing time. Am I ashamed of sleeping with her? Absolutely not. Laura has been a better friend to me than Rachel ever was. That's not to say Rachel wasn't my best friend, but Laura has always supported me throughout our nearly quarter-century friendship. She even stepped back from her own feelings to let me pursue and start a life with Rachel, which resonated with me deeply. That kind of selflessness is what real love is about. I know it might sound like I'm justifying my decision to sleep with her, but to me it was the right choice. I plan to explore what's next with Laura, with full commitment. So here's the update from yesterday, the day I met my wife and her lawyer to discuss the divorce. It's been 2 weeks since I ghosted my soon-to-be ex-wife, STBX. This past Monday, I received a call from my lawyer informing me that Rachel's attorney had scheduled a meeting for us to discuss the terms of the divorce on January 6, 2021 yesterday. I met with my lawyer the Tuesday morning before to go over my terms. To keep it brief, I wanted an uncontested divorce on the grounds of marital neglect by Rachel. My terms included full division of assets with Rachel taking ownership of the house. I'll sell my half to her. We'd each keep our own vehicles, and I'd retain ownership of my cabin in the Poconos. On the grounds of marital neglect, she would receive no spousal support from me. As for our son, whom we'll refer to as 17, from now on he'd be free to choose who he wanted to live with after the divorce, which I expect will be me. So yesterday I showed up to my lawyer's office dressed in my Johnny Cash best. Rachel and her lawyer were already there. Rachel looked like she was barely holding it together. I kept a stone-faced demeanor throughout. The lawyer presented her offer, which included terms for reconciliation. I shot it down almost immediately. To spare you the lawyer talk, we eventually agreed to a legal separation leading to an uncontested divorce. The only change was that I'd pay her $653 a month in temporary spousal support to cover her utility bills until she's employed again. Yep, she got fired for her affair with lover, who also got canned. She has enough savings to sustain herself for a while, and my income means that this support won't hurt me financially, even if she takes time to find a new job. After a year from the divorce finalization, she'll be on her own. It's a small price to pay to be rid of her cheating ass. The process will take roughly 3 months, so if all goes smoothly, I should be free of her by early April. After the meeting, my lawyer gave me some final advice before saying he'd be in touch with updates on the filing. When I stepped out onto the street, Rachel caught up with me and asked if we could talk. I decided to at least hear her out. In the meeting, she managed to hold it together pretty well, but outside she let the tears flow freely, apologizing profusely. She said she never intended for things to escalate as they did, and that she never expected to fall in love with lover. She admitted that she knew it was wrong to betray me, especially after thinking I was being unfaithful. Rachel asked if I could ever find it in my heart to forgive her, and if maybe in a few years we could start over. She expressed how she couldn't imagine her life without me. I told her to start imagining it now, because this would be the last time I would ever speak to or see her. I said that 17 is nearly an adult and can make his own choices about his future. I told her I had given her half of my life and every ounce of unconditional love, only for her to fall in love with another man. I assured her there was no chance of me ever forgiving her. The love I once had for her was destroyed over the months she spent professing her love to lover instead of coming to me with her issues. I told her I loved who she once was, but hated who she had become, and that if I never saw her again, it would be too soon. There we were on the sidewalk in Midtown Manhattan, her making a scene and crying her eyes out. A few passers-by gave us curious glances, but at that point I didn't care. I wasn't going to publicly humiliate her any further. I had already done enough damage socially and professionally. I needed to release the last bit of emotion I had for her. I told her I didn't regret the 23 years I spent being her husband. What I regretted was that in those 23 years she chose the easy way out. And thanks to some inspiration from Reddit, a thought that struck me just before I said it, I told her, "For 23 years I thought you were mine, but it turns out it was just my turn." I put in my Raycons, turned around and walked away. Later that night, Rachel's father called me to apologize. He praised me for always treating his daughter well and expressed his shame over her actions, saying he had raised her better. I won't lie, I'll miss the old man. Since my own father passed years ago, he's been a father figure to me. However, I can't see myself maintaining any relationships with her side of the family moving forward. After the call, I went on Facebook and symbolically changed my relationship status to divorced. Even though the divorce isn't final yet. In my mind, it's over and done as expected. My change in status sparked a lot of messages and questions. I told everyone who reached out that I filed for divorce with Rachel earlier that day. Laura called, surprised at how quickly I moved forward. She didn't know how advanced the process was, but she was there for me when I needed her. I invited Laura over, and she came right away. We spent the night together, talking until the early hours of the morning. I haven't felt this level of relief and connection in a long time. Laura understands me, and being around her feels incredible. Since she confessed her feelings, she's been all I've been thinking about. I know some might say it's too fast to move on, but to me, my marriage ended the day Lover and Rachel were together, so it feels like it's time to move forward. So that's where things stand. My divorce is in progress, and I'm beginning a new relationship with Laura. While I once said I might never marry again, Laura's revelation about her feelings for me has changed that perspective. We plan to take things slow and won't announce anything until the divorce is finalized. As for Rachel, I don't care what happens to her. She can move Lover into our old home for all I care. I'll be receiving my share of the house's value throughout 2021 in 4 quarterly installments. And aside from the $653 monthly spousal support, I'll never have to see or speak to her again. To everyone who offered support, encouragement, and praise, I'm eternally grateful.